So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to Accessibility Journey in Developing a Grassroots Effort for our institution. Our institution is Boise State University. I'm Tammy Schmidt, and I work in OIT Communications. My primary responsibility is I'm the instructional, I guess you could say, designer, developer, implementer, working with a lot of the project teams out of the PMO in the implementation of new technologies at the enterprise level. So things like PeopleSoft Finance, HR, Danny and I did business intelligence, pyramid analytics, those kinds of things. So that's my role, and I'm going to pass it off to Betty now.
Okay, thank you. And my name's Betty Miller. I'm from the School of Nursing at Boise State University. We started an online program in 2008 at Boise State, and it quickly grew to become the largest online program at Boise State. As we were building it right away, we wanted to build things right, and the literature just kept showing that accessibility was something you want to build in, not bolt on. So my role, I'm the online faculty technology manager, and in fact, technology came into my job title a lot because of our work on accessibility. So again, we wanted to share our experience over the past 4 or 5 years. So the how and why, what of our journeys. So taking you in the past, back to 2012, and then bringing you up to speed in 2016, and kind of predicting what the future is going to look like. Okay, I'll pass it to you.
Okay, so what is this thing called accessibility? In 2012, I was kind of hit with this when we did our very first portal for my Boise State. And these were the words that kind of hit me out of the blue. JAWS, screen reader, captioning, all this kind of stuff. I really wasn't up on it, but it was sort of this jumble of new words and terminology that I was suddenly having to deal with. So my journey began actually in 2012. And again, it was like, what is this accessibility? And my first entrance point to it was when we were doing our very first portal. And I was asked to, from a user interface perspective, to set up an appointment with somebody by the name of Mike Gibson. The PM wanted this review, and I thought, okay, I had no idea what I was doing. Got the meeting together, and we actually reviewed it. It was my first exposure to a screen reader and JAWS. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what people have to do in order to get information off the web and be a student at Boise State. And so from there, the next year, I started really thinking about how to create awareness. And it wasn't just sort of the federal perspective or the legal perspective. It became more of platforms, tools, and standards. So we started to see some things flesh out here in terms of what we needed to deal with. So from a tools perspective, the next part of that journey was I was asked to just teach a Camtasia Studio class for the campus. I did that, and out of that, we started talking about captioning standards, and we started putting together an instructional video guidelines project for faculty, working across what was then academic technologies, eCampus, OIT. And in that journey of teaching and captioning and working across those different groups and coming together to define some standards, Betty approached me and said, would you be willing to design an online webinar for my nursing faculty? Because she wanted them to begin to construct introduction videos and actually caption those. And that's how Betty and Miller and I kind of became cohorts on this journey
and
together.
Good friends.
Yes. And the other thing that happened from a process, so as we started this journey, again, it goes from awareness, but as awareness grows, you start bringing in tools and standards, and you start thinking about some of the other activities, aligning forces like Betty, and then process. At this point in time, Daniel and Leaf will know this, it took me 5 months to document the end-to-end process on what it took to do a video, to caption it, to save it, to be able to store it in the back end. And I think Kaltura was the back end. And I worked with somebody by the name of Stan Smith who was a very abstract thinker, and it took me 5 months to nail it down, and it was a very long 16-step process to do this, but it was the first time a process had ever been documented in terms of accessibility captioning that could be used by faculty and staff.
Great. Okay, so similar to the slide Tammy showed earlier, that was kind of the word jumble. You see usability, JAWS, accessibility. You know, I was in the same boat. And in fact, you know, in talking to people years ago, and even recently, they say accessibility. Does that mean like Mac, PC, compatibility? And I'm like, no. Accessibility, what we're talking about is, you know, a federal law. We're talking about Section 508 of the ADA. So as being an administrator and working closely with my boss at the time, Dr. Vivian Schrader, a lifelong nurse, professor, just right away, she always stressed doing the right thing. And I think that's partially because we're in nursing. So we're looking at patients and being an advocate for them. So when we saw that our community needed an online nursing program, because Idaho has few institutions, few and far between, we just knew from the literature and from various, you know, national conventions and whatnot, Quality Matters to WCET, that you want to have accessibility and usability built in. So, hence, we start our investigations. So before we could align forces with partners across campus, we actually had to identify partners. So we started out logical places like, oh, well, we'll go to our eCampus, who helps minister and start up online programs. They were dealing with so much growth themselves, they really couldn't commit any manpower to help us. So we continued on our journey, and at the time it was Academic Technologies, and we asked them, can you help us? Would love to. You guys are doing the right thing. We can't help you. So, lo and behold, from personal networking, I actually ran into a colleague, an old graduate student classmate who is Bob Casper, and I knew he cared about accessibility. So we were to the point of me explaining to him that we have an online program. It's growing rapidly. We were getting double-digit enrollments from our students each semester. And, hey, can we actually contract and pay you to jump in and take a look at our courses and evaluate them? And Bob, being the personable networker himself, he quickly arranged through the OIT customer care office from one director on up to our chief information officer to say, this is what nursing's trying to do. Thus enters Max Davis Johnson saying, we are going to help you. This is new for us, but we will commit 20 hours of Bob's time a week, and we'll do this for a couple months. Because the situation was, we had these courses, they were already developed, we had no idea, were we doing accessibility and usability well or not? So we were able to develop an audit. Let me say at this point, so 5 months into my journey here, that resulted in 12 different people that I met along the way. So from the audit, you have to know, are we doing okay? Where do we stand? Sure enough, from running some software called SortSite 5, which actually helps you flag HTML code not only for accessibility but usability, So like in terms if, you know, a person may have mobile limitations of their body, it will identify, can you cursor through or whatnot. Well, we ended up basically with a 59% rating across our program. So that's like a D. So we wanted to change. But again, I just got to stress that you must know what your current status is in order for you to do anything. So from our D grade, right away we found we weren't thinking of color contrast, font sizes, let alone closed captioning for videos. Also certain tools in Blackboard, we found that wikis, journals, they were not good. We had to audit those things out. So again, we started spending quickly. We knew, okay, we have a lot to repair here. And not only do we have to repair these things, but we have to think about educating faculty and having sustainability there. So I would say by that May in 2014, I now had up to 19 people I was working with, one of which, of course, Tammy Schmidt, Stan Smith, Allison Gonzalez. So OIT, Accessibility, Disability Resource Center, OIT again, Leif Nelson, more people in OIT, Training Communications, Jeff Oliver, Shad Jessen. But again, constant leadership from our OIT department of saying, these are new tasks. We've got people who can probably help you. So they really opened the gate to say, they'll spend time. So that was very fortunate. Yep. And now back to Tammy.
So what's interesting about this is I didn't realize I was in a very unique position because of my role. I worked a lot with the PMO. And so I got access a lot to direct stakeholders on campus, but I also had access to the sort of the back end part of OIT. And we started talking about VPATs. So I think the first project we actually talked about VPATs was pyramid analytics. I didn't even know what a VPAT was. I learned quickly what it was. But in lieu of VPATs, we didn't really have a standard process. We don't really have an accessible procurement process that's a real formalized process yet. But this whole other idea of accessibility acknowledgement statements came up because what I found out in working with the Disability Center and talking a little bit to legal was if we couldn't validate the total accessibility status of the product and the technology, then we had to develop something called an accessibility acknowledgement statement that would have to reside on the website that would state that level and also state when it would be fixed. And if we were to get audited by the Department of Justice, that kind of served as a bridge so that they wouldn't slap us totally with a suit, but recognize that we were working on it, we had awareness, and we were stating. And this became really important to me from a training perspective because I started incorporating all of this in my trainings because I didn't want to get up in front of the campus and not tell them it's accessible or it's not accessible and help arm them with accommodation because most departments are not going to understand exactly what they need to do for an accommodation. So I started incorporating that onto all my trainings, which meant I actually started incorporating it into all of the conversations I had on the project teams. And sometimes that went over well, and actually sometimes it didn't go over so well, which is where I found myself in this very grassroots position where you have to be the pioneer, you have to be willing to do some of the small little work. You have to be the person who reaches out and bridges the gaps and the white space. We did start having standards for captioning. We did have this instructional video guidelines project, which actually we did publish a website and shared that and started getting faculty a bit more involved. Then there started to be talk of a second version of My Boise State, which was going to be developed very differently than the first one. We started aligning more forces. So I was working with the Educational Access Center with a person who is blind. He is devoted to helping students. So I asked the question, who works with employees, because our training wasn't just for students. A lot of the training we were doing was actually for staff. And I was told it was HR. So there was another alignment that I needed to make because nobody knew anything about that entity. There was an ADA person. I went over and talked to that person and introduced myself and explained that I wanted to get them involved with technology, understanding what we're doing so that if an employee did come and self-disclose, they had an idea of what to do. The feedback I got at the time was she just looked at me and she goes, I don't even know what to do with you. No one has ever come and talked to me about this. We don't really have to be proactive. And I think my jaw was kind of on the ground at that point going, whoa. So I thought, well, there's a lot of awareness and education that needs to go on this side of the house. So I went back to the Disability Resource Center and talked to the director there and said, so is this true? You don't have to be proactive? And she said, no, that is really radically changing, even for employees and staff. You do need to be proactive. You can't really wait until someone just comes and self-discloses. But from an OIT perspective, I didn't want people to say we had implemented a productivity tool for staff and couldn't use it, and nobody was aware. And I think that is part of sort of that pioneering, really recognizing the networking and sort of the roots that begin to grow as you begin to implement, because then you become more strategic and thoughtful in like, how many other people is this going to impact? And what do we have to do to help them? The other thing that I did was I was involved in a program called Shared Leadership. They offered a mentoring program, and I asked the Title IX lawyer to be my mentor. And that was really good because I just really wanted to learn from a more legal perspective. What's involved with this? What do we have to do? Where can I go to get more information? The result of that was Annie Carrick was her name. I actually brought her into OIT. I introduced her to the project management teams. I introduced her to my boss. There hadn't been a relationship between the institutional compliance organization and OIT before. Her role was she wanted to review the technologies before we implemented them. And it was really helpful because even when we did some HR, I think it was student hiring, she immediately caught on to even some of the sexual harassment language that was in that hiring instruction set. But it was just nice because it started to build another bridge to an entity that really does become the compliant enforcement agency. But she had no idea about OIT. She didn't know technology. So that was really very useful. From a process perspective, like I said, we started integrating her. From an awareness perspective, we started looking at different conferences and still working with Betty across the nursing lines. In 2016, I would say we really welcome new partners. So this is really organic. At this time, we have no policy still at Boise State. At this time, we have nothing from management. We are just totally grassroots, just reaching out and doing what we need to do. We had some support from leadership, but there was nothing formalized going on. We had a new partner, marketing communications, because last spring there was intimation of a suit from a lawyer in the East Coast because none of our public-facing websites were accessible. And I think Chad said we have somewhere between 700 and 1,000 public websites. And he works with marketing communications, so that became a huge effort. And that was awesome because marketing communications had never really been involved with accessibility. They hadn't really thought about it. But now all of a sudden, everything that they put on a website for Boise State that's public consumption or student consumption has to be made compliant to the WCAG 2.0 AA standards. Institutional compliance started drafting an IT accessibility policy because of this complaint. And we're taking more formal ownership of it and ask us to start partnering more in VPAT reviews. And then the Office of Information Technology, we have something called the Solution Architect Board, and my boss was asked to sort of own the VPAT review. So now we're working across, again, in the PMO with a different element, not just projects, but on an architect board, and say, how do we implement a complementary process that aligns and parallels with requests for new technology implementations, whether they're enterprise-wide or just department only. We also began to establish a web and digital accessibility team. There was a lot of talk about it. It took a long time, probably a year's worth of talk, but at least it was recognized that that's the next step. And then Betty can probably speak more to this. Everything that was Kaltura was all a mix-up. Started getting really, really refined and easy for people with the TechSmith relay technology that was being implemented. From another partner, the Educational Access Center, I started working more with Mike. He was my only end user expert who did testing. He was a screen reader. But in talking to him, I mean, that was probably one of the most impactful things I could have ever done, was taking clients over and developers over and having them watch Mike use his screen reader to try to navigate through what they were just designing and developing. Everybody out of there, their eyes are like this big, they're saying enlightened, they had no idea. It really turned their life around. And so from a grassroots perspective, again, now you're starting seeding other people in other organizations because they've been exposed to it, they see it, they begin to understand it and appreciate it much better. And then instructional design and educational assessment, they were assisting faculty with accessible course design. And so now we start getting more of a holistic, systemic approach to accessibility across the campus, even though we still don't really have any formalized leadership policy. We have grown our network.
We have, definitely. And I've got to say, in the beginning of my journey, whether it was eCampus or academic technologies at the time, we have come so far as a university. Both of those departments now, they do build that into their faculty mentoring and training, and they do invest in even student workers like my program as well to help address. So actually, it's just very amazing how far we've come in 4 or 5 years. Okay, so I'll back, yeah. So I will catch us up to 2016 as well, but again, each year it always came down to awareness, because any department, and like I say, I think I was up to 24 new partners by the conclusion of my first 2 years. So every semester, every meeting, whether it's purchasing new software or training, I feel like I bring with me a constant need to make people aware. And so that continues. And at present, we have focused on our other online programs in our college. So my work and my team's work will be cut out for several years of, again, going through the audit process and repairing items. One of the biggest outcomes or most important outcomes that I'm sharing with people this year and last year is that you really have to look at your program and go to the mat to get job descriptions created of the right kind of people you need in your office. And you also have to really advocate for that budget as well to support those people. Presently, we have a budget of $27,000 per year just for accessibility improvements. That $27,000 primarily is covering 2 student instructional technologists. So job descriptions right away, and this could be true in your state, but if you go onto your HR job site or your school HR site, just take a look at job descriptions. None of them reference the skills that you need about closed captioning or the ability and aptitude to work with multiple software platforms and systems, let alone ask that employees know, number one, that they will be responsible for staying abreast of WCAG 2.0 issues, of watching the news, whether it's the Chronicle of Higher Education or whether it's different white papers coming from 3-Play Media, but you constantly need to be an observer, tracking different lawsuits or how people are responding. In fact, just a month ago, Tammy shared with me an article about Berkeley, and Berkeley took down about 16,000 videos that they previously had made public because they wanted to share that education. But they had made all of those videos without taking into account these standards. So unfortunately, they had to pull them down. So things like that, being aware, is what I continue to stress to my leadership, my dean, my directors, is $27,000 is worth it. That is the cost of doing business these days. Furthermore, for existing full-time employees, we are cross-training them as well on how to do these techniques. How do you repair videos? How do you add alternate text? How do you make sure that every syllabus has styles applied? And correcting PDFs. And at this point, actually, our program has moved away and has eradicated PDFs because it just costs benefit. It's just better to have the actual, native Word document or Excel document. And we just shared with faculty that, look, we have these documents protected in our content management system. So as you're using them in your live class, you will totally know if somebody changed that document or whatnot. I just wanted to say, though, before I talk about advocation, there's different ways to advocate. There's the formal process of helping develop a white paper and working with several partners or presenting at a conference like this today. But one of the most important things I'm seeing is I need to advocate about accessibility in terms of its complexity. And again, say, this is the cost of doing business. This is a contemporary skill set that you need for your people. So a year ago, and we worked on it for about a year, I made 8 more new relationships because we put together a white paper, which was about 11 pages of content, but about 60 pages of appendices. Yeah. But what was excellent was, I think, within the 2 to 3 years, our leadership was really paying attention. So we were getting institutional compliance, which is our legal office, involved. We were getting the library involved. Office of the Dean of Students, these different people coming to the table. So even these people in here who were chosen help collaborate and work on this paper for a year. When they came, they had no idea either. So I hope with your own journeys, I would just say that was a turning point once I saw it making it up the ranks with leadership. And then it's a turning point to garner that budget and get that. So what's exciting now in nursing is we actually have what we're calling the ADA team, and it consists of 4 people: myself, another full-time staff member, and the 2 student instructional technologists. But what we've done is we've created a lot of workflows, and we've documented our processes of how to fix things so that for years to come, I can continue to train more people and hire them. But in terms of faculty, I've got to say that faculty, The more they're exposed and the more that they see what we invest, the more they care about it. In the beginning, we tried the approach of trying to educate faculty how to repair things. And in my estimation, it worked. It just really worked best to say, we're going to repair everything for you. And then we would present to them that, okay, we have prepared 60 documents in your course. We corrected this many photographs. We redid your links. That got more buy-in from faculty to just say everything's fixed, but then handing them a report showing them all the work we did. And then furthermore, what we tell them is now that we have a small team, anytime you want to add new content to your course, just email us and we will do emergency, just-in-time rush jobs. So that is another strategy to think about for faculty. Just find the problems, fix them, then show them this is what we fixed, and it's amazing. So yeah, the skill sets too for faculty are changing these days. For our program, we have about 40 online faculty, and of late, more faculty, more and more. They know what accessibility, usability is about. And then they're just like, great, your program covers this and provides this service. Wonderful. So again, I'm focused on sustainability because we did fix our problems. We've got a team that's running. But I'm just really focused about making sure that these jobs and these duties are built in to the budget and people understand them. So I want to say, though, too, about budgets, not just for nursing, but our dean, our college, they're wanting to replicate what we've done in nursing now. And that's going to affect an additional 6 programs. So that's a lot of people we're reaching out to. But again, by having a leadership person there to know what kind of people you need to hire and what kind of skills they have, that's a turning point. So here I am today sharing my story. I'm excited to be at Northwest Met because I felt like I could get our story out to Northwest regional partners. I think that's very exciting. And relationships all the time. For example, here I am with a person from OIT, wonderful professional relationship for years, and we're together. And all I can say is you want to just continue doing the right thing. And as you make your path through, you know, I am now up to 53 relationships of people that I work with doing this work. So it can be very fun.
Okay, so new chapters. We're also sort of having a team built, and it kind of is surprising me that we got here. But most recently, my job description was changed so that 40% of my role now will be really focused on advocating and evangelizing accessibility across the campus, heading up some committees, getting the word out, really creating that awareness and that conversation, because that is the first point. So I'm really excited about that. As this journey's grown, it feels like it's been the right journey because things have just come in my path. I haven't really sought them out, but they've just been there, and I've been able to act on them and really reaffirm or make new relationships. My boss is putting together sort of in a web accessibility or digital accessibility team. He just hired a web accessibility analyst. And what that role primarily is to do is we have all these WordPress site admins. They worked really hard for 6 months to get all of those public-facing websites up to date, but the sustainability and maintenance of those has a downward curve because this really isn't a full-time job for most people. It's part of their job. So this new role is to really work with all of that group and help educate and train them and make sure that they do keep those websites maintained in accessibility perspective. And he's going to have 2 student employees working with this new position, as well as myself, because I'll be putting together the education and training strategy for the campus working with this person. They started conducting accessibility training. So my boss has a person does captioning training, creating PDFs. All the WordPress site administrators are getting trained. We have cross-campus alignment and communication, again, with human resources, institutional compliance, and educational. So it's real interesting. Now when we're implementing a technology, I shoot a message off to the business partner saying, hey, we're going to implement this at this target date. It may impact your employees. We're going to have a user accessibility testing. I would like to invite you to that because that's going to get you in front of the technology. It's an hour of your time, but now you're not going to be caught off guard. You're going to be fully informed of what's being implemented in case somebody should come to you and disclose. And institutional compliance is the same way. I send them an email saying, this is what's happening. So what's next? Tackling a procurement process that's accessible. Procurement knows about it. They do VPATs, but they really don't know how to evaluate and score. So we put together some standards and templates on how to evaluate and score a VPAT, so we can help educate now the procurement process and the clients who are wanting a different technology. We're looking at conducting a cross-campus accessibility fair this summer or early fall, because I think there's a lot of stuff going on around campus that has to do with accessibility, but not a lot of people know about it. So again, it's creating awareness now amongst the groups that are actually involved with it. Attending the conferences, as Betty said, is a great way of networking and sharing and learning, and documenting processes. So Betty?
Okay, so kind of short and sweet for my future. I'm going to continue honing the skills of my 4-person team, of which I am one of those people. I'm preparing to look at about 43 new online courses that will need to be audited, and then plan for the work there of how to get that repair work done and prioritize what courses so that kind of we can do an installment each semester. And really, I'm just finding people do come to you without effort. I've had, just this past year alone, I've had 4 different online programs, not in my college, come to me to ask questions of what they can do. So I will look forward to continue being an advocate and doing the right thing. Lastly, too, I just wanted to share one of our biggest successes is that 2 years ago, we did have a hard of hearing student, almost completely deaf, start our online program. And first of all, I got to say, some people say, what? A nurse who's deaf? How does that work? But life happens, accidents happen, and you may not always have your faculties with you. So for that first student, it was a no-brainer that she was going to focus on her academics and probably eventually, become a faculty member herself. It was excellent when the Disability Resource Center came over to say, oh, by the way, you have this student joining your program. They reviewed our course sites and said, we've never seen anything like this. There's really nothing that we need to help you with to accommodate this student. And I guess what I'm really, really proud of is in a couple weeks, we have another student who's graduating from our bachelor's program online, and she never shared that she was hard of hearing or deaf. She never had to. And she just shared it that, I just wanted to tell you, the past 2 years going through the program was great because I didn't have to let you know my hard of hearing.
How did that affect their clinical experience?
That is already taken care of. That's one of the requirements for the online program. That work is already done. So.
Oh, so they had completed that before she enrolled. Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we've had this similar situation just occurred a deaf student would never be able to be in this, and I was like, oh no.
Yes. And from the one student years ago, she was sharing how she had a special device as well to amplify. So technology keeps improving in all forms. And Tammy, she has quite a few testimonies to share, which speaks to her networking prowess and constant communication and training that she does.
So I just thought it would be interesting when I was putting this presentation together. By the way, I had to learn how to put an accessible presentation together because this was not the way we were going to do it. But when I ran the accessibility checker, guess what? It was not accessible. So I'm really trying to walk the talk and learn myself how to do accessible presentations. When I work with Mike, I'm finding that sharing Google files with him does not work as well either. It's hard for the screen reader. And so I do them in Word doc. And then with his boss, I still share them. So I really put myself in a continuous learning mode and really tried to walk the talk. But I did this because I thought everybody I worked with was also on this journey, whether they knew it or not. And sometimes it was positive, and sometimes people just didn't like it. And they really didn't like to see me coming because I was going to talk about this in projects. So I thought, I'm just going to put it out there. How has this impacted your life over your working life after the last 4 years? And I didn't know if I'd get any responses. And I actually got quite a few. But I thought it was important, and I wasn't looking for good. I was just looking for impact. So this was an instructional designer for learning and development, and he said, I really didn't know anything about it until I heard you start talking about it in shared leadership. And it has really forced me to stop to think about who my audience really is and how do I make the information accessible and inclusive for them. And he actually just left me a voicemail and went on and on about this, which I thought was really awesome. But he said, we kind of get in this rote way of designing, and he said, you sort of woke me up. The next one is, an interview candidate. We've been interviewing for this web accessibility analyst, and although they kind of knew it from a sort of the technical, sort of academic side, none of them had ever been exposed to working or hearing or knowing what access technology is. So they knew the words, they had gone in and updated their WordPress, but they had never ever sat with someone who used a screen reader, magnifier, Zoom text. And I had asked Mike to do a demonstration when I was in shared leadership because we were doing a section on diversity. And I thought it'd be really important. We're talking about new leaders, right, for the campus. They should know this, be able to promote it. And so this interview candidate mentioned it in the interview, said, it was because of what you did in shared leadership. That's what I know access technology is. And so that was just another example of how, in a very roundabout way, just having that presentation really impacted this person and how it came back in terms of an interview situation. The talent acquisition specialist, we had to do a lot of work on the website because we were implementing Taleo for an applicant and for the hiring manager. Not all of it was accessible. But he says, now as I work through job announcements and reference our webpage, I keep thinking, are applicants going to be able to understand how to fill out? Do we have the instructions correctly? Will everybody be able to access this information? Because this is the hub into the university. This is hiring. This is selection. And it's supposed to be equal opportunity, correct. And so there's a lot of stuff we had to work on for there, but it got him thinking. Next page. I love this one. This is a colleague of mine. He is a great storyteller. He's a great videographer. But I think the most important thing he said here was, what this means for me practically is that I need to be able to tell the story in simple written language first, text, and then add layers to access the story through additional modalities. And if I can't tell the story using written language, it usually means I don't yet have a universal perspective from which best to tell the story. And I think that really summarizes when you're looking at providing information in an accessible format, how do you tell the story in text? I mean, how do you make sure that that message gets across? He's just an awesome, awesome person. The next one was actually from my boss. And it's kind of long, but he had 23 years. He started out with the internet, he talks about the story about this a gal who has muscular dystrophy, and she's using her iPhone to really navigate her life and help her manage her kids and her family and so forth. And he said they watched her try to order a pair of pants. Took her 20 minutes to navigate the site to order a pair of pants where it would have taken us 2 minutes. Then she went to a site where she could order groceries. She ordered 20 items in less than 5 minutes. Because the website that ordering groceries was built and designed for accessibility, the one where she ordered pants was not. And he said, what I learned is that we can no longer control the user experience. How it looks no longer matters as much as how will that information be consumed. And then the last one, I'm kind of proud of this one because I work with this group a lot, and they have been somewhat resistant when I'm on the project with them just because it represents more work. And they think of training toward the end of the project, and I constantly have to say, you have to involve me in the beginning, and accessibility and so forth. This PMO project manager basically said I was embarrassed because she said, I never think about it until you're on the project, and then you start bringing it up, and then I'm like, whoa. But I think the best thing that came out of this was she said, I'm really going to talk to my group and add accessibility to their project management lifecycle and template now, because we need to get this in there so it's standard, and we talk about it very early on in the process. And I said I commend you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. And it's probably going to come better from a colleague than from me, because I've been asking for that. I think the next one. So as Betty and I both said, continuous education is really, really important. The best thing here for me is I've been reading this Universal Design in Higher Ed, From Principles to Practice. It's edited by Cheryl Burgstaller, who is the director of Do It, but it's an excellent, excellent book. It just broadens your mind and makes you think of all kinds of different things, but it makes so much sense, and she gives so many really great analogies that help people understand. I think we need to move from accessibility to really talking about universal design. I'll turn it over to Betty.
Okay, that wraps up our content, but did you have any questions or comments about your own school, please?
We are doing a summer institute for faculty, and we're talking about ADA and UDL and all of that. We were just talking about how great it would be to have somebody that is experienced with JAWS and is blind themselves attend and demonstrate. Mm-hmm. Is Mike available for hire for a small fee or something, or pay the plane ticket or something like that?
That might very well be. I have to say that has been the single most impactful thing I think I've done to help campus and others. And I was just talking to Aaron Day at lunch, and Aaron and I were sharing practices, because he does not Aaron Day, Aaron Page.
You want to bring me?
Yeah.
I honestly, my director
Yes.
probably would be really interested in paying you to come.
He does the same thing. Yes. Yeah. So, yes.
We're already hoarding money together.
Excellent.
Yes.
Not to take away
No.
from Mike's money-making
No.
abilities.
That's
but-
no. That's an awesome connection, because Aaron and I were just talking, like I said, and that is so impactful to have someone to do that. In fact, what we're currently doing is we're looking at expanding Mike and adding someone who knows Zoom text and adding students and other access technologies as well. Any other questions? Comments? Well, thank you.
Thank you.